so great to be with you.
What do we need to imagine to get sure footing with the change that's coming?
We need each other, and we make each other strong and brave.
And look, I wanted to be one of the first to tell the Unitarian Universalists Association General Assembly, welcome to Baltimore, June of 2025.
It is so great to be with you.
What do we need to imagine to get sure footing with the change that's coming?
We need each other, and we make each other strong and brave.
And look, I wanted to be one of the first to tell the Unitarian Universalists Association General Assembly, welcome to Baltimore, June of 2025.
It is so great to be with you.
What do we need to imagine to get sore footing with the change that's coming?
We need each other, and we make each other strong and brave.
And look, I wanted to be one of the first to tell the Unitarian Universalists Association General Assembly, welcome to Baltimore, June of 2025.
I missed my countdown, but welcome. Please rise as by the Adler Spirit. We'll be doing our opening hymn, Return Again. We'll sing it through one time, and then we're going to do it twice as a round. This side will go first, and then the second time, and then this group will go second, and we'll go through it twice as a round. So. Return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. This side. This side now. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are, return to where you are, return to what you are, and return again, return again, return. Okay, we'll work on that next time. I'll have to get the lyrics all worked out up on the screen also. Well, it is, I can just speak for myself, it is great to be back after having some time off. Thank you all for the generosity of time that you have given me. Thank you, and I have used it well to see family and to get some rest and preparing for services going forward, at least through December I've been working on. So for those who don't know me, I'm Reverend J. Wolin, the settled minister here at the Unitarian Universalists of Sarasota. And we especially want to welcome our visitors, both here in person as well as online on YouTube. We encourage you to find out more about the congregation. We invite you to consider registering on our virtual guest book, which you can find via a link on our website, uusrq.org. And if you are in person, there's a sign-up sheet outside. And if you do sign up, you will get our at least weekly email and the occasional extra one telling you about all the activities that are going on, and there are many, at the congregation. This is the second Sunday of the month, and so we have our potluck this month. It's the luau potluck, thus wearing my shirt. It was very hard, I have to admit, not putting a tie on today, I admit, but it doesn't have a top button, so it's very hard to have a tie. But anyway, everyone is invited, whether you've brought a dish or not, or whether you're wearing a Hawaiian shirt or not. Everyone is welcome. We look forward to getting to know each other. Just a couple of announcements. First, I just personally want to thank the volunteers who helped with flood mitigation here. I don't know if you saw the pictures on our website. I drove by, I could not even get in our driveway. Ed Loomis, resilient, was here, was able to check, make sure there was no flooding in the building, had a couple of leaks on top, but he and others have been cleaning up the grounds as the waters receded. Obviously, as you saw today, we have very minimal water on our ground. So let's give a big hand to Ed. And now I'd like to invite up Aubrey for Democracy Action Team.
Can we arrange that every time my name is said? That would be lovely. No, that would do too much to my ego. Good morning, everyone. As we enjoy today's service and potluck, we're going to remember that our community extends beyond these walls. And while early voting has started for the August primaries, we've also reached more than 1,400 voters in Florida and across the country through postcards, phone calls, and door knocks to date. This is more than 10% of the way to our board's Good Trouble goal of 9,500 voter contacts this election season. And just like a potluck, democracy works best when we all bring something to the table. So before heading home after service today, swing by the social justice table or uusrq.org to join us writing postcards to voters. These little cards pack a big punch when it comes to engaging our community in the democratic process. And while you're there, mark your calendars. August 24th is this month's Super Saturday Community Day of Action. It's going to be a day filled with energy, purpose, and yes, some snacks too, because we like to eat. So grab a postcard, sign up for Super Saturday, and let's keep this spirit of community going through November. Thank you for your time, and enjoy today's service and potluck.
Our opening reading today is from the Reverend Scott Tayler. Let us drink from the stories that sustain us all. We gather as a house of stories as we learn of those who have gone before us. The way in front of us becomes more clear as we weave together the tales of who we are. Our loneliness lessens and the web of our oneness is revealed. As we listen deeply in those times of tender trust, we descend into the longings and learnings, hopes and fears of the humanity that we share. Beneath the wells from which we drink, there is a deeper well that feeds them all. Come, let us tell each other tales of our thirst. Let us drink from the stories that sustain us all. So now, as we light our chalice, please join me in affirming one of our values, which is printed in the order of service and will be displayed on the screen behind me. Love is the power that holds us together and is the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love.
Good morning. Today's story is The Best Story by Eileen Spinelli and illustrated by Ann Wilsdorf. The Red Brick Library was having a contest. Write the best story and win first prize. A ride on the Super Duper Looper roller coaster with my favorite author, Ann Miles. Wow! So I ran home, I went to my room, I shut the door, and I sharpened 5 pencils. I opened my notebook to a brand new page, and I thought. And I thought. And I thought. And all I could think was, this writing stuff is hard and lonely. Maybe I needed some help. So I told my brother Tim about the contest, and he said, oh, the best stories are the ones that have lots of action. So I wrote a lot of action into my story. I wrote about a bus hurtling down the highway with no one at the wheel. I added a tornado and a pirate and a great white shark. But the story didn't seem quite right. So I asked my dad, and he said, oh no, the best stories have plenty of humor. So I changed the great white shark to a monkey, and I put the monkey at the wheel of the bus, and I turned the tornado into turnips, and I dressed the pirate in polka-dotted pajamas. Well, Dad laughed so hard he popped a shirt button. But even so, this story didn't feel quite right either. Along came Aunt Jane. She said, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing a story, the best story, and if I can win, I get a roller coaster ride with my favorite author. Oh, well then, said Aunt Jane, here's all you need to know. The best stories are the ones that make people cry. Ooh, so I gave the bus a flat tire, and I sent the monkey to the funeral of his pet goldfish. I turned the turnips into onions and made the pirate chop every single one. There were lots of tears, but the story still wasn't right. So my teenage cousin Annika said, well, I have news for you. If it is not romantic, it's a loser. So the pirate introduced the monkey to his sister, and they fell in love. I turned the onions into wedding invitations, and everyone lived happily ever after. Finally, my story was ready, so I read it to my family. Not enough action, said my brother. Maybe the monkey can fall into the wedding cake, said Dad. That would be really funny. You know, it's hard to cry at a wedding when the groom is a monkey, said Aunt Jane. Annika said it would be perfect if I just added a kiss. But all this time, my mother had not said a word, so I asked her, what do you think is best? Well, she gave me a hug. I think the best story is the one that comes from the heart, your heart. So that night after supper, I looked into my own heart and I rewrote my story. No more monkey or pirate. No more wedding invitations or happily ever after. My new best story is about my family and my two best friends, Tara and Josh. It's about my cat, Ollie, who sleeps on his back, and toast with strawberry jam. It's about fireworks and rainbows and bike rides. And my biggest problem was keeping the story short, because once I started pulling things out of my heart, it was hard to stop. But I turned my story into the judges. Maybe I'll win that roller coaster ride. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'm happy because I'm a winner, because the story I wrote is my own, not somebody else's, and that makes it the best. Yes. So, everything and everyone has a story, and sometimes the stories are true, and sometimes they're just made up, but all stories make us feel something: happiness or sadness, boredom or a sense of adventure, anger or uplifting hope, and sometimes many feelings all at the same time. Think about the stories that we all tell about ourselves or the world around us, or even Unitarian Universalism. Are they stories from the heart, or just stories that we tell to mask the truth underneath? Your true story is the best story. This is a safe place to share your true story, and I can't wait to hear them at the potluck after the service. So now I invite the children and youth to meet me in the West Wing for a welcome back open house where we can get to know each other, tell our stories, and learn about our values. And if you're new, no worries, just come with me and I'll show you the way. Thank you.
Okay, please rise in body and or spirit for our interlude hymn 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. For our centering in words, I wrote a little poem called Stories of My Life. My memories conflate multiple events. I remember what I want to remember, what I need to remember. All of my experiences have impacted me, but my stories have formed me. Out of hardship, hope. Out of adversity, resilience. Out of suffering, compassion. Out of curiosity, wisdom. Out of searching, purpose. Out of love, justice. Out of war, peace. Out of death, life. As we look at the story of our life, let us ask not only what stories formed us, but what story do we want to write now? As we gaze out on the horizon, what do we imagine the end of our story is? That we are still living. As we go into a time of silence, I want us to consider what it is we do with this one wild and beautiful life that we have. And also, I would like us to also just take a moment as well to say a prayer in our hearts for all those who are suffering from the negative outcomes of the storm that we had this past week, and that is continuing to ravage the country in different parts of the country. Shakespeare wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the people merely players. They have their exits and their entrances," end quote. Our lives are stories, or at least they are a conglomeration of experiences that we turn into stories. It's sometimes easier, of course, looking back on our lives to see the arc and the scene changes in the stories of our life. And often we play those stories over and over again in our minds like a reel that constantly keeps turning. And some of those stories are true, and some of them are not. Sometimes they are stories we are told when we are very young. I think of my grandfather telling me week in and week out, we'd go to breakfast with him every Sunday morning, and he would tell me I could do anything I wanted to in my life. Now, that was not literally true, of course. I knew I was never going to play shortstop for the Yankees, but it gave me confidence that I could have opportunities in my life. The stories we are told can be damaging as well, right? You're too short. You're not good looking. You're not smart enough. You are this or you are that denigrates your self-worth. And a story told often enough, good or bad, gets woven into the fabric of our souls. Now, most years, my siblings and I go on vacation together, and whenever we gather, at some point, we often start retelling stories of our childhood. And of course, some of these are the sentimental kind, reminders of our parents and friends and neighbors. But then we always sort of get back to what I will just call hijinks that we were involved in, some of which I will not tell you about. But it always includes at least the family-related stories of the famous water pick war. I don't know, does everybody know what a water pick is? I realize that's sort of out of a few of you. It was a way back in the 70s, it was a very big thing about cleaning your teeth, you know, how water would come shooting out of it. Well, anyway, after one such water pick war, my brother somehow ended up with a concussion. It's a long story. They like to tell the story of when the babysitter put me in a straitjacket one night, literally. And then another well-worn tale is when my siblings trapped me in the doghouse. Literally, we had a doghouse in our backyard, and they rigged it so that a brick would fall on me if I left the doghouse. Now, depending on how I tell that story, I could have been languishing for hours in fear and agony, leaving me with lifelong trauma and the reason why I got bad grades that year in school. I tried that one on my parents. They did not go for it. Or I can tell that story as that is the reason why I am so resilient in the face of oppression, and how I learned to be patient, and why I am comfortable in small spaces. It's all about how we tell the story and the meaning we need or can make from it. And the brick did fall on my head. They should have gone into engineering. It was very well thought out. Well, even though we are older, my siblings and I also often fall back into the roles we were when we were children. My brother, the oldest, the responsible and wise one. My sister, the only girl and middle child, the peacemaker and one who's used to being believed. And myself, the youngest, the mischievous troublemaker. We won't get into the whole, I don't have time to get into the whole, birth order thing, but there is a thing to that. And I think, it brings up an interesting point, how we have different roles at different times in different places, or even just different parts of our lives. So even though in my family, the storyline, I was a mischievous troublemaker, with my friends, I was the one who actually helped mitigate trouble or helped us get out of trouble when we got into it. And in some ways, I will say, I still consider myself a troublemaker, but sort of the good trouble, like we've talked about with the Democracy Action Team. Speaking truth to power, sometimes speaking encouraging but difficult truths, and asking people to change how it's always been. So I look back on the story of my life, and I can tell it again in many ways. But the one I like is I was a smart kid from the Bronx who survived a rough and dangerous neighborhood, who worked my way through college in a mailroom, and then eventually went from the mailroom to the boardroom in the business world. And after reaching a modicum of what I considered success at that time, I gave it all up. And when I felt the call to ministry. And now I seek to help people find meaning, to work to change hearts and souls and systems of oppression. That's the 30-second overview of my life story. Now, of course, there are millions of experiences that I had, painful and joyous, that were in between and happened along the way. There are people who died along the way, people who left, and people who stuck with me. And there are people I have left and had to have let go. All of that is true, and it is also incomplete. The Buddhist Pema Chodron writes, "There are no true stories. We are making up every one of them," end quote. Meaning, We each bring our own lens, history, and circumstances to how we interpret our experiences and the world. And we should realize that our interpretations may be different from others' interpretations of the same experiences. And how we interpret something over time may be different. Whether we grew up in a rural versus a city community, whether we grew up white or a racial minority, whether we grew up financially secure or poor, right? All of these and many, many other circumstances impact how we interpret experiences. The writer Christina Baldwin says the opposite, quote, "There are only true stories. We are discovering the truth in them," end quote. So how we experience something in the moment, how we interpret it looking back can be different. Right? I could look back on my upbringing and I could focus on the danger and the trauma and use that as an excuse for my challenges. And I could have easily allowed it to swallow me up as it did many others. But I had other stories tell me that was not the end of my story. Of course, I had my grandfather, as I said, but I also had the Hebrew Scriptures, the story of Exodus repeated every year at a sacred meal, a story that tells of a life of slavery and hardship of our ancestors and a hope for a better life in this life and for our descendants. And this story tells us a better life may require a journey into the wilderness with troubles, but the journey and the hardship eventually lead to freedom. And that story encouraged me to go on even when times got hard in my life. And again, being the youngest in my family, I also appreciated the Hebrew Scriptures because it is the youngest son who always gets the blessing in the Hebrew Scriptures. Right? Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, Joseph over his 11 brothers. It is a literary motif, actually, showing that even if you are the underdog, you can come out on top. Now, I had stories as well in comic books, right, such as Spider-Man, who was a geeky teenager who gained superpowers, right? And when I was a geeky teenager, and I was, this gave me hope, right? Now, I see the concept of superpowers a little differently now, since I didn't get bitten by a radioactive spider. Not that I really tried to do that, but you always wondered, like, oh, when is that going to happen to me, right? But I found my own superpower, and we each have to find what our own superpower it is. For me, it was recognizing over time who I was and realizing what I was capable of doing and accepting that and accentuating that and living into that. If we can all do that, we will find our own power. I saw Broadway shows such as Don Quixote, which showed me a vision of going on valiant quests. So when new opportunities presented themselves to me, I overcame any fear of staying with the safe and secure. That's that mischievous part of me. Stories expanded my mind and my vision in the world. Stories can show us what we cannot see from our own experiences and can give us a vision of what we cannot imagine. The author Neil Gaiman wrote, and I quote, "Fairy tales are more than true," right? Not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us dragons can be slain. Nothing is inevitable. Call it faith, call it vision, call it a dream for a better tomorrow. All the crises that are with us are real, but I believe in the story of Unitarian Universalism, a religion that can grow and change and is free to do so. And in fact, it's almost expected to change. As well as we tell the stories of our predecessors with all their faults, striving to move the religion forward, as fallible and flawed as they were, they moved it forward. And now we too, fallible and flawed, continue to move ourselves, our congregation, our religion, our society forward. So I ask you to think about, what story are you telling about your lives? What story are you telling about the life of the Unitarian Universalists of Sarasota? And what story are you telling about Unitarian Universalism writ large? What story would you tell to define the way you would like us to be viewed in the future? And the only way that story becomes true is if you make it true. So I invite you to think about, as well, stories of generosity that you can tell in the future as we take our collection. Please be as generous as you can. For those online or those here on your cell phone, there's a link to donate in the YouTube video description or the QR code that's in the order of service. Let this sacred time begin. Our next reading is from Ursula Le Guin, and she writes, "Storytelling is dangerous to those who profit from the way things are, because it has the power to show that the way things are is not permanent, not universal, not necessary. Having that real, though limited, power to put established institutions into question, imaginative literature has also the responsibility of power. The storyteller is the truth teller. We will not know our own injustice if we cannot imagine justice. We will not be free if we do not imagine freedom. We cannot demand that anyone try to attain justice and freedom who has not had a chance to imagine them as attainable. And now once more, Tom Bryn. So this past June, I attended the first intentionally online General Assembly. So for those newer here, I'll quote from the Unitarian Universalists Association, known as UUA, website. It says, General Assembly is the annual meeting of our UUA. Participants worship, learn, connect, and make policy for the association through the democratic process. So just FYI, next year, I don't know if you're here watching early, is going to be in Baltimore, Maryland next year, hybrid in-person in Baltimore, June 18th to 22nd. And I do highly recommend it. I have always loved going to General Assembly, or at least I've probably gone 15 times over the last 2 decades. I remember my first few were just exhilarating. You know, just worshiping with 5,000 other UUs. It was a tangible reminder that we are larger than just our local congregation. You know, I was introduced to new and expansive theological learning. I also learned best practices, learning how other successful congregations operated. And, you know, since becoming a minister and now having been a Unitarian Universalist for about 40 years, I still enjoy experiencing worship and theological ideas, but mostly now when I go, I just really enjoy connecting with old friends from previous places I've lived. And I spend a portion as well supporting Unitarian Universalists for Jewish Awareness, which I'm on the board of, and they have a booth, and so usually I'll share about that as well as participating in a Shabbat service at General Assembly. But this year, like others, there were great speakers. The annual Ware Lecture was offered by Rabbi Julia Watts-Belser, who spoke on disability wisdom and learnings which included teaching us to be more intentional and the need to slow down. There were actions of immediate witnesses and responsive resolutions passed. And of course, the largest item for discussion and voting was regarding Article 2, which includes our principles and sources. And the new Article 2 passed with over 80% of the vote. And the UUA website describes it as, and I quote, our shared covenant is expressed through a set of inseparable and deeply interdependent shared values. Now, I admit, I use a mnemonic to remember the values, a JETPIG, which is justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Much easier. Now, that may not be kosher, but it, but it does make it easier to remember. At the center of our values is love. Each of those values is centered in love. And all but one of our previous principles are woven into the values statements. Now, this is part of the ongoing story of Unitarian Universalism. Every couple of generations, new generations have input into how our religion will evolve. That is part of the story. We change. Sometimes change can be hard. I will be honest, there are things I love about the new Article 2, and there are things I don't love about the new Article 2. But that does not change my love for this religion. Right? I have grown as a human being and have found meaning in life through my experience as a Unitarian Universalist. Words on a piece of paper do not change who we are. They are an expression in a given moment in time. They can be a guide just as our principles can still be a guide. They still exist in writing, in our hearts, and now we have new, additional words as well that can be written upon our heart. Our history shows there is more than one story happening at any one time. The goal of multiculturalism is to weave those stories together, to welcome those stories, to learn from each other and to grow together, to allow our diversity to help us thrive. So we will always be a community that supports each other and the larger community. There is no higher call. Where I saw that with the storms just this last week, members helping members get through difficult times. Our building also served one of our partners in the community this past week as a staging point for food distribution for those in the larger community who were displaced or needed meals due to losing power and losing all the food in their refrigerator. We have many, many different stories about what moves us and helps us grow, whether it be humanism or Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, nature, spiritualism, personal direct experiences, or many others. We have the opportunity to create and experience that here. We are not monolithic, but we are full of many, many stories. Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Adichie talks about the danger of a single story. She tells of when she came to America from Nigeria for college, and her roommate was shocked that she spoke English so well, not realizing the official language of Nigeria is English. The roommate asked to hear some of her tribal music, and Adichie put on Mariah Carey. This is what happens when we only hear or limit ourselves to a single story about a group of people. Right? I think of Nigeria as a place where I get calls from some prince who wants to send me money, right? Adichie says, and I quote, "Start the story with the arrows of Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of African state, not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story," end quote. So how we frame a story and from whose perspective determines how societies understand events. Theologian Reinhold Niebuhr wrote, and I quote, "We must resist our dreams of managing history," end quote. We must learn the truth, not just our truth, but others' truths, others' stories. That these last number of years, I've made a point about learning others' stories. It comes from deep listening to those who I am in relationship with, but it also comes from just reading or listening to books from people who come from different backgrounds than I do. Among others, I've read Roxanne Dunbar's An Indigenous People's History of the United States, which spells out many of the atrocities we as a country perpetuated on the indigenous people here. I've read Isabella Wilkerson's The Warmth of Other Suns, which is a tale of migration of African Americans from the South to the North. I've read Enrique's journey about Central American immigrants' journey to America, and as well Jennifer Finley Boylan's She's Not There, about an individual transitioning their agenda. All of these stories in these cases really widen, right, the lens for our understanding and allows us to see the world through others' eyes. This is something that this state and our school system is trying to prevent being taught in our schools. All of these journeys from these people and many others, right, are both internal and external, tell the stories of people looking for freedom, looking for wholeness. And we need to learn our own stories, we need to learn others' stories, and we need to learn each other's stories. Because I think that's to me why small groups are so important, because in those groups you really get to meet other people and get to know them deeply and hear their stories in their life, and that widens the lens of our experiences. We also need to learn and create new stories, stories of compassion, stories of empathy, stories of forgiveness, stories of justice fulfilled, stories of creating peace, stories of creating the beloved community. Let us go forth today and start and continue to create such stories with our lives. May it be so. I invite you to rise in body and/or spirit for our closing hymn, number 121, We'll Build a Land.
We'll
words are from Jonathan Adler, professor of psychology. A life story is written in chalk, not ink, and it can be changed. We are both the narrator and the main character of our story. That can sometimes be a revelation. I am actually in charge of this story. May it be so. Please join me in extinguishing our chalice with the words that are up on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you all for your presence here today. Go forth, be happy, be good, and eat.